have never become known.
There are sections of our community who have strong feelings against communists and the Communist Party. Yet even they have to admit that some of the leaders of the Communist Party had played an exceptional role in the liberation of South Africa. One such a leader was Bram Fischer. A book on his life has just been published, and we thought it appropriate to rebroadcast this profile we prepared in 1996.
Bram Fischer was born in 1908 on a farm near Bloemfontein. He came from a well-known legal family. His father, Peter Ulrich Fischer, was Judge-President of the Free State, and his grandfather, Bram Fischer, had been a cabinet minister in the Union of South Africa. Bram went to Grey College and then on to University of the Free State to study law. A highlight of his career was playing in a team against the All Blacks in 1929. And he was also the first nationalist president of the Student Parliament. He seemed a model Afrikaner. But when did his ideas change, setting him on a path far removed from that of his fellow Afrikaners? In the 1930s, he went to Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar. He travelled Europe and visited Russia. He came back to South Africa in 1937 and opened his first practice. He married Molly Krieger and had 3 children. He moved fast in the Communist Party and by 1946 was chairman of the Central Committee. The nationalist government came into power in 1948 and the party was banned in 1951, and Molly and Bram were both served with banning orders. But he was constantly at work for the party, this time as an underground organization. When the Congress of the People, the forerunner of the ANC, adopted the Freedom Charter at Kliptown in 1955, Bram and Molly watched from a koppie in the distance. This led to the treason trial. It was the first big political trial that Bram defended. 56 people were accused, but were all acquitted. Bram continued both with his commercial work and with his political work. And then in July 1963, Leliesleaf Farm in Rivonia was raided, and it was just by chance that Bram missed that arrest. He was asked to defend what became known as the Rivonia Trialists. He didn't want to defend them, but was persuaded because he was an Afrikaner and could argue on the basis of someone who understood a people's birthright. President Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Govan Mbeki and Ahmed Kathrada were amongst the 8 sentenced to life imprisonment. Many people had expected the death sentence. In September 1964, Fischer was arrested and charged under the Suppression of Communism Act. After handling a case in London, he returned to South Africa and then skipped bail. He then went underground as Douglas Black, and during this time was struck off the advocate's role. He was only captured when a colleague was severely tortured and gave away his whereabouts. Then he was charged on 15 counts. These ranged from sabotage to fraud to contravening the Suppression of Communism Act. It was during his trial on March the 28th, 1966, that Bram Fischer made a 3.5-hour speech from the dock in the Pretoria Supreme Court. In it he said,
"When the laws themselves become immoral and require the citizen to take part in an organized system of oppression, if only by his silence or apathy, then I believe that a higher duty arises. This compels one to refuse to recognize such laws."
He was sentenced to life imprisonment. This past week, his daughters Ilse and Ruth testified before the Commission on his treatment in prison.
There seemed to be a very determined effort to humiliate and undermine Bram. The man who was in charge of their section, a man called Dupree, seemed to take particular delight in trying to humiliate him. He cut Bram's hair short. He made Bram wear clothes that were far too big for him. He made Bram wash the toilets on his knees with a rag endlessly. And I think that there was a general sense that Bram particularly was targeted because he, as an Afrikaner, was the real pariah. He was the traitor to the folk.
We learned from your statement that Bram got ill and progressively ill.
We were not told how badly Bram was being treated while he was ill, because we only at that stage were getting information from him, and he always tried to underplay what was happening to him. But when we'd had 2 visits with him some weeks apart, and in both he was on crutches and in great pain, we realized that he just wasn't getting treatment. On the 6th of November, Bram fell while trying to shower on his crutches. On the 7th of November, he asked to see a doctor who didn't come. On the 8th of November, he again asked to see a doctor, but the medical orderly said it was impossible to get a doctor. On the 9th of November, Bram was in great pain. The medical orderly provided some analgesics. On the 12th of November, Dr. Brunt said there was no fracture. I don't think he even did an examination. But Bram was still in tremendous pain, which continued onto the 13th and the 14th. Finally, on the 15th of November, 9 days after the fall, Bram again saw Dr. Brunt, and an X-ray was at last done. The radiographer identified a fracture of the femur. On the 16th of November, Bram was seen by a specialist who confirmed the fracture and advised hospitalization. On the 19th of November, 13 days after the fall and probable fracture, and 4 days after the fracture was diagnosed, Bram was eventually admitted to the HF Verwoerd Hospital.
Thereafter, he was diagnosed with secondary cancer. The authorities then relented and placed him under his brother's custody. Bram Fischer died in May 1975.